That's why Jesus said, seek first the kingdom of heaven. When you wake up in the morning, seek God first. When you start your daily work, take Him with you. But to do that requires will. Now, it's much easier if your company is good. It's much easier if you have introspected and know what you should avoid and what you've done wrong. But in spite of those things, you've got to use will. Will is the greatest thing. Will is the greatest thing, and realize this, that your will, if you couple it to God's will, is His will. And you have sufficient power to overcome all things. Will is the third and most important thing. In changing your habits at will. Know what you want to do. Avoid the company that keeps you from doing what you want to do. And finally do it by the use of will. And realize, you think, well, I haven't got strength. Of course you haven't, as long as you think so. But if you realize you're not this body, but you're one with the great omniscience of God, His great consciousness, His great light, which is spread all over, and all the power in the universe comes from God, the power which has created all the stars and the suns and luminaries, that's God's power, that's in you if you will join with it, make it your own. And so will is a very important thing in changing your habit. That is to use steady will. And that means the will that does not peter out, the will that does not get discouraged. Why should you get discouraged when you know you're God's child? The will that does not peter out, the will that sticks until the thing is consummated. That's what the kind of will we must have if we are going to change our habits as we'd like to have them changed. And so that brings us to the final point, why you haven't changed your habits at will is, finally, this is the greatest, because you haven't made the habit for God. Isn't that so? You can't get around it anyway. When you want one thing and want it to the exclusion of everything else, you'll get it if you use a little will. We haven't done that. We haven't made the habit for God. We've made plenty of other habits to eat and feed the family and get the new automobile and buy the house, but we have not made the habit for God, which is the most important thing. Because we cannot move and breathe and have our being, we cannot have those near and dear to us, we cannot have anything except it be for God. And don't you think we should realize that and not forget the giver? We enjoy His gifts, we enjoy one another, we feel the great love of God in each other's hearts to a certain extent. Don't you think we should think of the giver a little bit? Don't you think the giver of everything is worth 1/24th part of the day? 1 hour. Don't you think so? If we could just realize that and give 1/24th of the day to God, form the habit for God, then you'd see things change. And if you do that, if you realize that, if you form the habit for God, 1/24th part of the day even, if you do that, what's the result? Habits of self-realization. Habits for God. What will be the result? God contact. Now, it won't come by you sitting down and doing nothing. It won't come by my just hoping it. You've got to make the habit for God paramount in your life. Make that the reality. Because He is the reality, and you can't move or I can't move. Our heart will not beat. We can't move a muscle even except God is in us. And those that we have who are so near and dear to us, we can't have them except God is in them and in us. We don't realize it. Don't you think we need to give a little time for Him? That's why the Master said, isn't God worth 1/24th part of the day? I think He is. Realize God is the sole doer. He's the sole doer. Everything that happens from the creation of universe upon universe to the making of you and me and every little single cell in this whole business is the product of God's action. He is the sole doer. That's the thing we must realize. We must get away from personality worship. We must get away from that. That's of worldly consciousness. That's of the cosmic dream. Now, the Master brought that home to me very clearly one time. He was leaving Boston a long time ago. He'd been there 3 years. And I was bemoaning the fact that he was going to leave because I thought the whole earth would fall apart. Why? Because there'd been a little personality worship, don't you see? So he said to me, and this woke me up, because I didn't need to be that way. He said, remember, Doctor, never mind what happens to me. Imagine the Master saying that. That showed his humbleness, showed his greatness before God. He said, never mind what happens to me. That light which you see at the Christ Center is far greater than I am. That's God himself. And so then I realized that personality worship is not good, because God is the sole doer. And as one great Indian saint has said, when you realize that God is the sole doer, then you have salvation. And another thing, he said, if God's power flows through you, if God allows his power, that's the way it is put, to flow through you, then you can help another soul. Otherwise not. Now, don't you think that means God is the sole doer? If he is the sole doer, our first and greatest habit should be for him, because everything we have, we owe to him. If we realize that, make that our sole habit, then we have God contact. Having God contact, we have sufficient power to overcome all our evil habits, all our bad habits, and the greatest thing is we will have freedom of our soul.
In order to profit from these practical teachings in a meaningful way, which will have a definite and tangible impact in your life, we suggest that you subscribe to the Self-Realization Fellowship's home study course on the science of yoga. Please visit the SRF on the web at yogananda-srf.org or call the SRF's Mother Center in Los Angeles, California at 323-225-2471.